Thank you. One of the many problems we all face is that our vision of the city of the future and of the future of transportation and transit is stuck in a 1965 world. Even newfangled ideas like Hyperloop was patented in 1867. Most of our vision of the city of the future actually comes from the 1933 World's Fair, where about a third of the population of the United States showed up to watch the most visited industrial exhibition in the history of the world, which was the Futurama exhibit, sponsored by General Motors. That gave rise, of course, to all kinds of imagery in popular culture, the Jetsons still shaping most of the imagery that we carry in our head about the city of the future, and even the Jetsons could not solve all of the problems that our cities face with transportation. So, we're stuck without a clear roadmap of where we're going. And yet, certain changes are occurring in our industry, most prominently in public health and in neuroscience, that it's pointing a new way forward for the role of cities and particularly the role of transportation in shaping cities. And the first really starts with a fundamental constant of the need of the human body. Our bodies need 10,000 steps every single day in order to function optimally. And if your city is not designed to build walking into everyday life, if you have to drive to the gym in order to be able to get your exercise, you have designed your city to be unhealthful. And the future is not going to solve that problem for us. The movie WALL-E predicts very accurately the public health implications of autonomous vehicles. And yet we know what the alternative is. We know that there are incredibly powerful relationships between designing for walkability and strong, powerful public health outcomes in our communities. And we know the consequences of not doing otherwise. But in addition to the physical health sciences, I've also been increasingly fascinated by the role of neuroscience, which is able to quantify the factors, particularly the environmental factors, that make us happy. Happiness, in fact, for the last about 50 years, has been written out of our planning codes and our goals. But we know now the biological factors that make us happy, and there are many of them. One of my favorites is the neuropeptide called oxytocin. It is the biological basis of social trust. And it's produced by the human body under very limited circumstances, including gazing longingly into the eyes of someone we love. It is produced most prominently during breastfeeding and orgasm. But it is also produced when we exercise outdoors, not indoors, only exercising outdoors. And so, is it any wonder that communities that create walkability not only create healthier people, but they create happier and more trustful people? While the communities where you're forced to get in your car for all of your basic needs not only result in permanent physiological changes to the brain that make us angrier and less trustful, but also less capable of thinking through the consequences of our actions as a result of the brain being bathed in the fight or flight response hormones that happens when we're stuck in a car. In fact, while there are strong correlations among gender and college degree attainment, there's no greater correlation than dependence upon the automobile for predicting whether somebody is a Trump voter. So, surely, autonomous vehicles will solve all these problems, right? Well, there are some benefits. So about 30,000 Americans a year die as a result of human error in automobile crashes, and autonomous vehicles can likely put a significant dent in that problem. Very interestingly, autonomous vehicles effectively eliminate the role of parking in our cities and allow for tremendous benefit to our urban places. Autonomous vehicles also create a certain amount of additional efficiency on our roads and highways. You can cram more cars onto the streets, which may be good or bad, depending upon your perspective. On the good side, and something that we're seeing already, is that autonomous vehicles can solve the first and last mile problem for public transit. They also create a death threat to public transit unless public transit agencies act immediately to embrace this technology and work with municipalities to regulate it appropriately. But one thing that autonomous vehicles do not do is solve our congestion problem, and that is as a result of what we call induced demand. So congestion is incredibly annoying. We all hate sitting in it. So we complain to our city traffic engineers and demand that the roadway get widened. And so you raise your tax dollars, you widen the roadway, driving is faster, and now suddenly, not only are we happy, but we can make new choices, like moving to the bigger, cheaper house farther away because we can still drive to our jobs on time because they widen the highway. So the problem with faster driving is it means more people drive, which means there's congestion, which makes us sad, which makes us raise our taxes again, because surely one more lane will finally solve our congestion problem. I know it never worked before, but this time we promise that lane widening will really work. The problem is that traffic congestion is not an infrastructure problem, it is an economic problem. And the other problem is that the magic of cities works because of their geometry. Cities require a certain amount of concentration in order to work, and their transport systems require a certain amount of geometric efficiency in order to support that compactness. The problem with the automobile, and the autonomous vehicle doesn't help us solve this, is that it takes up about 10 times as much space to move a person in a car as in almost any other mode of transportation. And so simply moving people around in their autonomous pods doesn't help make cities work, unless those autonomous pods are high occupancy autonomous pods, also known as buses. So we need to be thinking very carefully right now, understanding the revenue model of autonomous vehicle companies, because of course autonomous mobility will be free in the future. The revenue model, if you look at who is investing, is not mobility, it is advertising. And the role of the cities is to recognize that your greatest asset as a municipality is your public streets. That is your greatest, most valuable asset, and it is going to become imperative for cities to manage their most valuable asset for the public good. And that means taxing waste. We are finally going to recognize that if congestion is an economic problem, it can only be solved with economic solutions, which means introducing price to the equation and not pricing people or goods moving. We need to be pricing empty space on our roads, wasted space on our roads in order to make the system work. But the real answer to the question of what is the right vision of the city of the future is that the city of the future is going to focus on the fundamental human constants of health and happiness, but more importantly, delivering greater equity to all of our people. What this means is that our work, the work of all of us who, whether we're in the private sector or the public sector, is to align the mechanics of governance with our values. Too often, in both the private sector and the public sector, we have grandiose statements of values, but don't bother tying those values into clear goals, tying the goals into objectives that can be achieved, developing clear strategies for achieving those objectives, developing performance measurements that can tell us the degree to which we've achieved our objectives, and most importantly, aligning our strategies and performance metrics with our budgets. If you're not tying your goals and values to your budget, your goals might as well not exist. And finally, in order to demonstrate that the mechanics of governance are in alignment with our values, we need to report back to our policymakers and to our citizens. This is exactly the work that Oakland is now engaged in. The act of aligning all of the details, our codes and regulations and requirements and warrants and funding formulas, aligning all of those mechanics with Oakland's clearly held values. And guess what? If your city or public agency has clearly articulated values and brings all of your work into alignment with those values, you can get a lot of stuff done. This is our 2-month work program in Oakland. On September 20th, we eliminated most urban minimum parking requirements. The following day, We eliminated automobile level of service from transportation impact analysis because in Oakland, a person riding a bus is no longer valued at 1/40th the value of somebody driving alone in a car. In Oakland, somebody on a bike or on foot is no longer considered merely an obstacle to the free flow of motor vehicle traffic. And there are only 3 cities in the United States that have done this work so far. Who here is next? On October 4th, we released our new departmental strategic plan. October 6th, we released our new org chart focused on service delivery teams and the implementation of our values. Yesterday, we took to City Council a rearrangement of all of our parking management policies, again, to focus on outcomes like business success, like equity, like affordability, and traffic reduction and housing affordability. And at the end of the month, we'll be releasing our first capital improvement program that puts equity foremost in how we make decisions about how we spend money. This is what you can do if you are clear about your values. And our values are straightforward and they're well agreed upon. And our strategic plan speaks to those values, identifying a long list of actions that the department is committed to implementing in year 1 and in year 3. There are no grandiose policy statements. This is an action plan designed to allow the public and our policymakers to hold our department accountable for delivering on its mission of not solving the traffic congestion problem, which we have no control over, but on doing the things that transportation can do. Transportation has a larger role in public health outcomes than the medical profession does. That is a fundamental role for us. Transportation is the best tool for delivering economic opportunity to people most left behind by previous decisions. Transportation can only do these things, though, if we define what we mean, define equity clearly, and link it to our budget. So that is task 1 in our plan. Lowering transportation costs to our low-income households is our primary strategy for addressing housing affordability. I can't control rents, but I can keep my neighborhoods whole if I can reduce household transportation costs at the same time rents are rising. I can improve access to jobs, particularly in our transit deserts, like along the International Boulevard BRT route. We can have a powerful statement that no traffic deaths are acceptable in Oakland, and lo and behold, acknowledge that if you are Asian in Oakland, you are 3 times more likely to die in a traffic crash than you are if you are Caucasian. We can provide safe access to school and address the fact that 42% of children in Oakland are obese, in part because they don't feel safe walking to school, and that is denying them not only health, but educational opportunities. We can adopt a complete streets program that doesn't just say, yeah, make streets complete, but actually gets into the nerdy details of traffic signal warrants, of level of service standards, of all of the wonkish detail of how we design and manage our streets, again to produce better, more equitable outcomes with a focus on our most vulnerable users. We can recognize that the city's economic future is completely dependent upon a successful BART and AC transit, and work with them to make transit fast, frequent, and more reliable, particularly since we govern the operating space for AC transit. We can invest in our public spaces so that our neighbors can meet one another. We can be a better agency partner, because guess what? We can't do any of this alone, and we can all do better working together. We can involve our communities in more effective ways, both to hear from them, but also to develop a more trusting, more respectful relationship between the governed and government. And finally, we can use data, not anecdote, in order to make real decisions and justify how we're allocating our very, very limited resources in a scrappy city like Oakland. So ultimately, this is your choice, to look closely at the gap or contradiction between the policy statements that your community or agency has adopted and whether or not all of the mechanics of what you do are in alignment with those values. Tie your values to your performance metrics, tie your performance metrics to your budget, talk about this a lot, report back, and develop trust. Thank you very much.